This is about Tulsa race riot or race massacre, whatever you prefer to say it. I'm going to talk about the details of it as fast as I can. I have a limitation about how long these can be, and I don't think this is going to make. I'm going to probably not going to make it. So these are from actually a um, notes that I took from interviewing a bunch of survivors back in 1994. So I'm going to kind of pass this along with you. What is the Greenwood District? The Greenwood District, because the oil brought in so much money into Tulsa, we had earlier talked about the Glen Pool, and with that money brought more money to Tulsa, and Tulsa became the oil capital of the world. And what you have is that there's an area north of Tulsa called the Greenwood District. And so north of the railroad tracks, right there at Greenwood and Archer, is known as the Greenwood District. It is Black Tulsa. And white Tulsans called it Little Africa or the cesspools of Tulsa. The area was called Black Wall Street by Booker T. Washington when he visited. And that's why they get the nickname Black Wall Street from actually Booker T. It had a renowned surgeon, its own theater, many thriving businesses, and one of the most thriving black communities in the United States. Where does it come from? It comes from Ottawa Gurley. Ottawa Gurley had sold all of his land in Guthrie when he had moved here in the land run. He had gotten with E.P. McCabe and had come with an idea to go to North Tulsa and create a black community in Tulsa. So he sold all of his land and came in and bought 40 acres of what we know today as the Greenwood District on North Tulsa. And he only sold it to colored only. That's what he advertised it as. And so the town lots and everything. So Gurley is the man who was promoting. Gurley is the man that was promoting this area. He built a hotel and started hosting people in that hotel, and right there on the Greenwood Strip, and helped others to come in the area. The first attorney moved there. His name is Buck Colbert Franklin. We're going to talk about him later. Um, and so you start seeing all these renowned figures that we're going to talk about in this area. Now, this is Andrew Jackson Smitherland. They called him Andy. Um, he is going to start the first newspaper in Black Tulsa, known as the Tulsa Star. It was also the first and only black daily news article that came out. He had gone in 1977 to Dewey, Oklahoma, where a riot took place where a white mob burned the homes of at least 20 black families to get them out of Dewey. He traveled to investigate the story, reported his findings to Robert Lee Williams, and he also wrote about it extensively in his newspaper, the Tulsa Star. Because Smitherland's advocacy, the crime did not go unpunished. 36 members of the mob, including the city's mayor, were arrested for this. So when Smitherland starts doing this in North Tulsa, he becomes the object of many threats from the white Tulsans to stop doing that. And they threatened him. They threatened him verbally. They also threatened him through other newspapers in the city. But Smitherland is one that's going to be a focus of many white Tulsans for his advocacy against these race riots and things going around in Oklahoma. Now, this man right here, I'm not 100% sure if that's him or not, but I think it is. This is Dick Rowland. His real name is Jimmy Jones, and his mother was the common law wife of a man named Roland or Rollin. There's so much to really dig through to figure out what is truth and what is not in this. So when they moved to Tulsa from Veneta, he started going to Booker T. Washington. He took his stepdad's name, Roland, and he changed his name to Dick because he loved the name Dynamite Dick. So he became Dynamite Dick Rowland. Now, he was a tall, strong kid, played sports. He played football, he played basketball. And oftentimes he would actually drop out of school to go around with this giant shoe shining kit to make some money. And he was one of those kids probably in this time frame that do you actually go through the education or do you make money? And apparently in downtown Tulsa, you could make a lot of money shining shoes because you've got all these rich, wealthy oil men that would invite you into their office and you can clean their shoes off and make them all shiny and they'll pay a pretty penny for it. So Dick Rowland is the man we're going to focus on today because he's going to be the focus of the attention of everything. Now, on May 30th, 1921, it's the tall building in the background is the Drexel Building. The the uh, the Drexel Building is one of the most is probably one of the most busiest buildings in downtown in the middle of Tulsa. It's like on the biggest strip. There's tons of people there. And so Roland goes into this building and he gets on the elevator. On the elevator is an elevator operator by the name of Sarah Page. She's 17 years old. She just moved down here from Kansas. She was leaving her husband and she was trying to get divorced while she was down here to make money so that she could enter school, college school, not high school. She started working as an elevator operator. Now, this is not like you have today where you go push buttons. You would go in an elevator, and there would be an operator that would crank the lever there and tell you which floor she wants to go onto. So that's the setting. You got to, I mean, she's 17 years old and she's divorced. She's screwed up. So nobody knows exactly what happens. There's a billion accounts. But no one knows. Something happens because here's you got a nervous black boy that's probably 14 years old, 15 years old. He's getting on an elevator in the busiest town, in the busiest building in Tulsa to go shine this very rich man's shoes. He gets on the elevator with an extremely nervous girl, 17-year-old girl who's divorced. She's probably not right in her mind. And she sees a big old strapping black man getting on the elevator at the same time as she's alone. It's not like a big, they're together. Now, Roland has with him this giant shoe shine kit. So you can imagine what happened. Nobody knows exactly. There's a billion account. Who knows? He's got this giant kit. He's going through a little door. There's a little bitty girl there. He may have brushed the kit up against her. Some say that he tripped getting onto the elevator and he grabbed the first thing he could, which was her arm. There's a lot of things. But if in this situation that's so intense, in 1921, a black man got onto an elevator with a white girl. She didn't like it. She screamed. She was scared. Roland runs home. He leaves. He goes and gets out of the building. He runs home. His home was actually in the outfield of where the baseball park is in Tulsa. At the same time, there's this newspaper which I absolutely have no good words to say about, the Tulsa Tribune. It's no longer a newspaper, but the Tulsa Tribune started putting out blatant accounts of what was going on. And if you see in the middle there, you can see the one newspaper article that really got everybody upset in Tulsa. It's owned by Richard Lloyd Jones. And it basically, if you really look into it, the people of Tulsa, the sheriff of Tulsa did not want to arrest Roland. It really wasn't worth his time. You have this hysterical girl. You have this hysterical girl. He really didn't even do anything. He either brushed his kid up against her or he tripped and fell. Whatever he did, the police chief didn't even want to deal with it. But there's a lot of pressures of people for him to do it. So they arrested him the next night, and the next morning. The next morning, the Tribune had already written an article called "Nab Negro for Attacking Girl in an Elevator." This is a call for a lynching. So this newspaper, if you were to really look for a, other than the fact that racism was happening, if you were looking for a culprit through this whole process of enraging people and giving them information, the Tulsa Tribune is what's called a yellow journal. They're cowardice. They're holding behind their words on their journals, um, and they basically stuck the words out and just enraged the people. If you doubt this, if you don't think this can be happened, look on your social media on the next thing something gets said by a journalist of some sort. They can enrage the people. It's no different today than it was back then. They can throw out something, get everybody all roused up about it. It can happen. So right here, this is the Tulsa jail. And this is where they had Roland. And Tulsa had an actual history of lynchings. Just a few year before that, Tulsans had actually gone into the jail, lynched a white man by the name of Roy Belton. It was even rumored that the Tulsa Police Department held traffic up as they took him out of town. So Tulsa has a history of lynchings. So two groups show up to the front of the jail. There's a group of white people trying to protest to get him. And then a couple of truckloads of black men showed up with guns. A few white men had broken into the jail to get Roland, but they were escorted out. At 10 a.m., a scuffle started between a white man by the name of McQueen and a black man by the name of Cole. The scuffle got to the point where a gunshot went off, and they said after that all chaos went loose. Within the first hour, there was a gun battle that was taking place between whites and blacks, and 7 bystanders were killed. They believe 6 of those are white, and 1 of those was a black man named, I can't think of his name. Many white Tulsans would push the small armed black group back to the railroad tracks right there at Greenwood at Archer, and they actually fought across the railroad tracks all the rest of this day. And they shot each other. They shot at each other. Many of the whites showed up to the National Guard Armory requesting guns, and they were basically pushed away by at gunpoint. So what they did was they went to local pawn shops and they looted them. They broke in and they looted them. And if you look at the newspapers at that time, many of the pawn shops were asking for the guns back. You would be amazed at the list of guns that these pawn shops have put into the newspaper. So June 1st, they had a small group of guardsmen that were actually standing on the railroad tracks trying to keep both sides from shooting each other and trying to keep both sides from crossing. It was only like 60 men. And 1,200 whites showed up with guns ready to go after them. This is brought on by the Tulsa Tribune, putting out extras throughout the day about gun battles going on. So all of white Tulsa literally showed up to fight these black guys that had guns. And eventually they got across the railroad tracks and they started looting and burning businesses and houses. When it's all said and done, they burned down 35 blocks of North Tulsa to the ground. They would go inside a house, they would loot it, and they would burn it. And sometimes people would be hiding in the house, and they would start burning the house, and people had to leave. And there's multiple accounts of this happening. And that's one of the things that a lot of black Tulsans talked about, was that they would be under a bed and someone would step on their foot or something. Many black residents were arrested or detained at a baseball park, the community hall, and a few other small buildings that had the ability to hold them in. And here it is. This is Tulsa on fire. If you look at the streets, you can see all the people walking to the fire. They would arrest them, and people would scream at them in the streets, and they would say derogatory words to him and just scream at him. And they would capture him and march him down the street with their hands up. And they would have, as one of the guys would tell me, a captain would come out and say, "Get your hands up, get your hands up." And so they would get their hands up. And there you go, more of just the whole. They also, just like we talked about yesterday or the other day, they took photographs and they put little Africa on fire and they put the dates and they sold them as postcards. And at the end, everything these people had is gone. And so you look at these communities, they're burned to the ground. Now, these people that were in like the McNulty ballpark, they could get released if a white person showed up and vouched for them and said, "This is my gardener, or this is my maid," and they would put these tags on them, like police protection or a card or workman or something, and then they could be released. And eventually, when all the fighting took place, they started releasing them, and people were able to go home. What these people found, though, was that building ordinances were in place that made the rebuilding very expensive. They had to build with materials that would not create a big fire. So, like bricks and steel and hard mortar, which is very expensive, and these people just lost everything. So banks refused to give them loans to rebuild. They had clauses in their insurance that said had a riot clause. They could not get money for being part of a riot. Many were arrested for basically building with illegal building materials. A black attorney by the name of Buck Colbert Franklin would come in and get them out of jail, encourage them to build with whatever they could. If they could get orange crates, if they could get anything that they could build with, just build. And then they would come getting arrested, and then he would come and get them out of court. He would fight for them in court and get them out and let them go build again. Go build whatever you can build. And so they ran these building ordinances afterwards. And that's him. Uh, he goes by Charles Franklin. And he's the one that would come in and fight for him. And he was the target of many accusations. He's one of the ones, along with Gurley, along with the first ever big time surgeon there. They were the cause of the inciting the riot. All of White Tulsa said it's these big time, wealthy black men that incited the riot. He spent most of his life legally helping North Tulsans rebuild. His son is a national historian by the name of John Hope Franklin, and if you go to where the Tulsa race riot took place, you're walking in the John Hope Franklin Memorial Park, is what it is. Now, what are the stats? More than 800 people were killed. Were admitted into hospitals. With over 6,000 black residents were arrested and detained for several days. The Oklahoma Bureau of Vital Statistics officially recorded 39 dead, but the American Red Cross actually estimates that 300, and many historians believe it's up that way. There's been a number of digs, one recently, trying to find these mass graves, and they recently found one. I think they had 18 in it. And if you listen to some of the videos and things of the time, some of those make sense. There was a cone of silence that hovered over these whole incidents, with many documents being purged, many lips being sealed. It was pushed on to um, Mayor Evans of Tulsa. It also made it all the way to the governor's seat, which is J.B.A. Robertson at the time. And so there's a lot of stuff there. Documents that have missing pages, documents that have all kinds of stuff that you probably, if you dig into it, you won't find anything. So in retrospect, Tulsa had rebuilt the area, made a large park in honor of the horrific event. Tulsa built their baseball park where the drillers played today, and the outfield is right against the fronts of the Greenwood Avenue. Dick Rowland is exonerated. He moved to Chicago, changed his name, and nobody knows exactly what happened to him. There is some people that believe they know what happened to him. Sarah Page, she disappeared. Think about girls, they changed their last name, boom, they're gone. The Black Tulsans finally got the materials they needed to rebuild. The cone of silence is eventually broken over 10 decades of time. The survivors' stories have been told. So much is still being uncovered. Many of the survivors are already passing, and it's our job to pass this along, to tell everybody what happened in Tulsa. Now, this video is going to take me over the 25 minutes, but I think it's important.
Tonight we're going to report a story that's almost 80 years old, but it will come as news to most Americans as, frankly, it did to us. This country's most violent race riot didn't happen in Newark or Watts or Detroit. It happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in June of 1921. For decades, city officials covered it up. The history books barely mentioned it, and people, white people that is, hardly ever talked about Tulsa Burning. But all that's changing now. The state commission has begun investigating the riot and is already raising tough questions about what today's citizens owe yesterday's victims. And it's revived memories for George Monroe of a night 78 years ago when his mother saw 4 white men walking up to their house carrying torches.
Our mother told us to get up under the bed, and we got up under the bed. We could just see just their feet. They came in and set fire to the curtains, and one stepped on my fingers, and my sister put her hand over my mouth to be sure to stop me, because she could tell I was fixing to holler because it hurt.
Monroe escaped with some sore fingers. His home and the rest of Tulsa's black neighborhood, called Greenwood, was burning. Before the riot, 10,000 blacks lived in Greenwood, did business there, prospered there. In fact, Greenwood was one of the nation's most vibrant black communities. But children quickly learned that they lived in a different world from whites.
The tracks was a dividing line. Now, every Sunday, we would climb on top of the coal car and throw enough coal on the side of on our side, and I guess they did the same thing, but every Sunday we had a good coal fight. We would throw at them and they would throw at us.
Like a kid's little riot?
That's a good description of it, like a kid's riot. That's right.
The kids, of course, learned from the adults.
There was total segregation, wasn't there?
Oh, that was the wonder of it all. After Oklahoma became a state, the first law passed by the Oklahoma legislature was Senate Bill 1 that completely segregated the state.
Don Ross represents Greenwood today in the state legislature. He's one of the prime movers behind the campaign to uncover Tulsa's dirty little secret.
How old were you when you heard about the riot of 1921?
I was 15 and in high school.
You hadn't heard about it until you were 15.
Never heard, didn't believe it.
What Ross heard then is that on the morning of May 30th, a young black man got into the elevator of a building downtown, and that the elevator operator, a 17-year-old white girl, screamed.
The Tulsa Tribune, which was the afternoon daily newspaper, printed a fantastic write-up of this event. They had a front-page story that said, "Nab Negro for attacking girl." Within the next hour, there's lynch talk on the streets of Tulsa.
Historian Scott Ellsworth has been studying the Tulsa riot for 20 years. It's not just an academic quest for Ellsworth. He was born and raised in Tulsa. So the word of a lynching was out in the streets. Whites started gathering. How were blacks reacting?
Great concern. I mean, everybody knew what was about to happen.
Many of Tulsa's blacks were veterans of the First World War and armed. A group went to the courthouse and offered to help defend the jail and its black prisoner. The sheriff told them to go home.
And as they're leaving, a white man goes up to a tall black vet and says, "Where you going with that gun, nigger?" And the vet says, "I'm going to use it if I have to." The white man says, "Like hell you are, give it to me." A struggle, shot goes off. The worst riot in American history begins.
Just about then, as dusk was settling in, Venice Sims was getting ready for her high school prom.
Had a beautiful dress, shoes, everything new. And even some borrowed pearls. The seamstress had let me have her borrowed pearls to wear. Everything.
Do you have a boyfriend?
Sure. Secretly. My daddy didn't allow us to court. But I had one.
And then you're supposed to go to the prom, and what happens?
Well, that's when the riot, that's when it started. And that's when the bullets started falling.
Miss Sims, her family, and many Greenwood residents got out of town during the night. Others stayed and fought, but by dawn, they were overwhelmed.
Right before dawn, as many as 10,000 whites descended upon Black Tulsa.
Opening fire?
Opening fire. There was a block-by-block battle throughout the black community. They would force the occupants of a house out. If people resisted, they were murdered on the spot. The homes were looted, and then they were set fire to.
Did the white authorities do anything to try to prevent this or control it?
They don't. They spend most of their time arresting blacks and disarming blacks, preventing them from defending their homes and businesses, taking them to these internment centers around town.
Sounds like a precursor of ethnic cleansing.
Absolutely.
Kenny Booker's father hid his wife and 5 children in the attic just before armed whites came to the front door.
We could hear him from the attic talking to him. Said, "Nigga, do you have a gun?" I think he said no. And he said, "Don't set my house on fire, please." He didn't tell him why, but after he left, not long after he left, I set it on fire, and we had to scramble down in a hurry. And his sister, that's 6 years old, she said, "Is the world on fire, Kenny?" I said, "I don't know, but we in trouble, deep trouble."
The trouble came from the air, too. Investigators say some of the fires you see in this rare footage of the riot were caused by whites dropping explosives from World War I vintage planes flying over Greenwood. The flames destroyed almost every home and business in Greenwood, 35 square blocks in all.
We didn't have no home. Everything was burned. All over there where we lived, just burned down to the ground.
Late in the day, martial law was declared and National Guard troops patrolled the streets. The dead were everywhere, the bodies lying where they fell. Photographers turned some of their grisly pictures into souvenir postcards. Most of the dead were buried quickly in unmarked graves around town, but some apparently were laid to rest here in Tulsa's Oak Lawn Cemetery in this anonymous section reserved for paupers. There were no funerals. The authorities outlawed funerals. There were no coffins, no headstones, no records of the burials. But a 10-year-old boy saw it all. Clyde Eddy walked by the cemetery with a friend, saw some men digging and some big wooden crates.
And we went in, naturally, and walked up to the first one and raised the lid up. There were 3 bodies of black men in it, just thrown in there. And we went over to another crate, a larger crate, and raised the lid on it. And there was 4 bodies in this one. And there was, let's see, 1, 2, There's either 4 or 5 more boxes scattered around. And about that time, one of the men saw us, and he run us out.
The newspapers didn't think the mass graves deserved many headlines, and the White City Fathers, proud of their booming oil town, wanted to bury the story along with the bodies. The official version, typos and all, came in a National Guard report. It said there were 35 dead, 9 whites and 26 blacks. But that number just keeps on rising.
We think now that something like 300 people were killed in this.
How many people were left homeless by the riot?
Oh my gosh, 10,000 people were left homeless by the riot.
How many of those were white?
None.
The survivors lived in tents and shacks which they built themselves.
My brother was 14 at the time, and he helped my father install wood. It was raining, as I can remember, it rain. Seemed like it was rain, and we had a wooden floor in our tent. We were lucky to have that.
But Tulsa's whites gave them something. Promises. Now, in fact, after the riot, the city's white establishment said it was going to rebuild Greenwood. What happened?
They lied. Not a dime. They proceeded to pass a fire ordinance that said, in effect, that you cannot build on property that had been burned. They wanted to starve blacks out of the land. They made it known to all philanthropic groups, we don't want your money. We will take care of our own. And there will be no problem. They spoke. They lied.
Courts and insurance companies paid some damage claims filed by whites. All black claims were rejected. A grand jury filed no charges against whites. 57 blacks were indicted for rioting. And in fact, they'd put up one hell of a fight.
In my community, among those survivors, they won the riot. They won it. You know, only till they brought airplanes in and dropped bombs and firebombs and brought the National Guard in could they subdue my people. That's the view from the black community, that airplanes and National Guard saved them white folks. We were winning.
For Ross, setting up a legislative commission to study the riot was a way of keeping that pride alive. Eddie Faye Gates is one of the members.
It said history is the lie agreed upon. Well, somebody agreed not to tell the story of the riot in Tulsa. At first, there was denial, you know. It didn't happen. It wasn't that bad. Now, Tulsa and Oklahoma's way past the denial stage.
The commission is looking for the truth by looking for the dead. But Greenwood is looking for more than just some unmarked graves.
Somebody has to pay when they do wrong. If you don't, if there's no penalty for wrongdoing, there's no incentive for societies to do the right thing.
Who should get reparations, the 60 or 70 survivors or the descendants of all the people who were wronged at the time?
My wish list, which I don't think we'll ever get, would be that there would be adequate monetary payments to survivors, the living survivors. For the descendants, maybe scholarships for the college-age children of these descendants.
The sons don't pay for the sins of the fathers. They pay for only their own sins.
State Representative Bill Graves opposed setting up the commission and thinks Tulsa should put the past where he says it belongs, in the past.
The statute of limitations is run on the people here involved that were injured.
What would you say to one of the survivors who would say to you, lost my home, lost everything my family had worked for?
I'd have to tell them that I didn't think they have any right to money from the legislature. This is a tragic thing that happened to them. Tragic things happen to other people that seems unjust to us, yet we have to live with them.
What do you think should come out of this? A memorial?
I have no problem with a memorial. That these people should be, I think, remembered and honored for what they had to go through.
Don Ross says he doesn't need a memorial. He's already got one. His anger.
I feel strongly, if I'm ever satisfied with whatever we do, that I will let down some people who educated me in my life and who died angry. I am their living memorial. My anger is.
But George Monroe, the kid with the sore fingers, has a longer view about reparations, about monuments, and about everything that's happened and not happened in Tulsa since that dark day in 1921.
It's still here, even today in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Segregation is still here. It's still here. But it's loosening up a little bit now.
So 75 years after the riot, segregation is loosening up a bit.
A bit. That's a good description, just exactly what you said. A bit.